my end here. Okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm going to get things started now. So welcome to the UTSC OVPRI Research Excellence Speaker Series. My name is Joshua Van Rye. I'm a Research Services Officer here at UTSC in the OVPRI office. I just want to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to participate and is able to hear all that's presented today. So should you need to turn on live captions, please go to your meeting controls. It's under More Actions, and you can turn on or off live captioning. I'm just going to turn off my video now to ensure a good connection for everybody. Okay, so some housekeeping. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded. Please mute your audio and turn off your video to accommodate those that might not have enough bandwidth. We will be hosting a recording on the UTSC Research YouTube channel, as well as the OVPRI website at a future date. This information will be put in the chat box at the end of the Q&A, as well as mailed out to everyone that registered for this event. And then we just ask that participants hold questions until the end of the talk. And if you do have questions, please put them into the chat box. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Professor Ken Welch, Associate Vice Principal in the Research and Innovations Office.
Thanks, Joshua. So the Celebration of Research Excellence Lecture Series is sponsored by the OVPRI and celebrates those who have won awards from our office, the Principal's Research Award, and recipients of CRCs and the Royal Society. But before we begin, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Today, we are celebrating Professor Alan Sachs. Professor Sachs is a recipient of the 2022 UTSC's Principal's Research Award. Professor Sachs is a professor of organizational behavior and human resources management in the Department of Management here at UTSC with a cross appointment at the Rotman School of Management. Prior to joining the University of Toronto, Professor Sachs was a member of the Department of Management, now the John Molson School of Business at Concordia University, and the School of Administrative Studies, now the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies at York University. Professor Sachs earned a BA with honors from the University of Western Ontario in psychology, an MASc from the University of Waterloo in industrial organizational psychology, and a PhD from the University of Toronto in organizational behavior and human resources. Professor Sachs has conducted research on a number of topics, including organizational behavior and human resources management, specializing in recruitment, job search, training, employee engagement, and the socialization of new employees. His research has been published in refereed journals, including the Journal of Applied Psychology, Personnel Psychology, Academy of Management Journal, Journal of Organizational Behavior, Journal of Vocational Behavior, and Human Resources Development Quarterly, as well as in professional journals such as the HR Professional Magazine, the Training Report, the Learning Journal, Canadian HR Reporter, and the HRM Research Quarterly. Professor Sachs is the author of no less than 3 textbooks, including Organizational Behavior, Understanding and Managing Life at Work, Managing Performance Through Training and Development, and Research, Measurement, and Evaluation of Human Resources, as well as co-author of the recently published book, Advanced Introduction to Employee Engagement. And without any further ado, let's actually hear about this wonderful research. So over to you, Alan. Thank you.
So this is a topic I've thought about for a very long time, and it was only during the pandemic that I started thinking more seriously about it, and I thought it was time to take a closer look and actually write a paper about it. So I've published 2 papers on the topic of caring in the last couple of years, and I'm going to be sharing some of that information with you and talking about what I've learned about this topic, which is it's still a new topic for me, and I'm still learning about it, but I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned about caring in organizations. But let me just begin by asking you to think about some questions about employee engagement. For example, how engaged are employees? You know what? I've now got the wrong slides here. Looks like the slides I had, okay, had disappeared. Let me just get these back. Just having a problem here with my slides. They're not showing up now in the share feature.
Alan,
here.
did you want me to share? Did you want me to share the slides from my end?
Yeah, they're not showing up now.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'll bring up your slides here. Okay, so can you see these, Alan? Can everybody see
Okay,
these
good to
slides?
go?
Yes.
Okay, so I thought I'd begin by just asking you to think about some questions about caring, and these are questions I think employees should be asking themselves today. And you could ask these questions about a job you've had in the past or any job you want to be thinking about. So let's begin then. Josh, if you could turn to the next image here. So does my organization care about employees? Does my supervisor care about employees? And do I care about my organization? And if I care about my organization, how does that affect my attitudes and behavior? And if I don't care about my organization, how does that affect the way I behave in my organization? So I think these are questions that are important to be asking today. And if you ask these questions, you can perhaps begin to see where I'm going and to begin thinking about just how important care is for everybody when it comes to work in their organizations. So I'm actually going to be talking about 3 different related things today. Could go to the next slide, Josh. So I'm talking about the need for caring in and around organizations. And the first thing I'm going to be talking about is what we know about caring in organizations. So surprisingly, this is an area that has not received a lot of attention. I thought that this is something that would have a lot of research, but it actually doesn't have very much research. And so what I've done is I've found research on caring in different areas, and what I'm going to try to do is bring them together and kind of make sense out of it. So I'm going to talk about some of the main research that's been done on caring, and then show you how I think it comes together and makes sense. I think I'm going to be talking about is some research on socialization and caring. And then the third part of my presentation talks about pedagogical caring. And I want to talk a little bit about pedagogical caring and how it relates to caring in organizations. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do in this presentation. So as I was saying at the beginning, it was during COVID that this topic of care suddenly seemed really important and something that I should start looking at more seriously. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons from COVID-19. And we've learned lessons about caring and how important it is for organizations to care about the employees. So during the pandemic, it became clear, I think, what it means to care for employees. When you look at the things that organizations could be doing and should be doing for their employees, and how many organizations did these things, but many organizations did not. So if we could just go through this list here, you could see some of the things that organizations should have been doing for their employees during the pandemic: ensuring that employees have personal protective equipment, maintaining social distance requirements and masking, providing employees with additional compensation, paid sick days, rapid testing, hand sanitizing, making vaccines available at work. And I mean, one of the things about this is we all know what the consequences are of organizations that did these things and did not do these things. And clearly, you know, as an organizational behaviorist, we often think about employees having positive attitudes and their behavior and their job performance. And suddenly, what we're looking at is consequences that have to do with quite literally life and death. So the consequences of not doing these things and not caring for employees, really, I don't think have been so evident. So let's now think about, you know, what are some of the consequences of an absence of caring during COVID-19. And let me tell you, there's no shortage of some of these stories I'm going to tell you now. I've just pulled out a couple. I have a file about this big of many articles of what happened during the last couple of years. And these are some examples of what I consider to be the absence of caring during COVID-19. Correctional staff in Ontario warn that there's not enough personal protective equipment available for guards to prevent them from bringing COVID-19 into jails. Some refused to work after they were not allowed to wear protective gear amid the spread of COVID-19 in provincial jails. TTC employees staged work stoppages over claims management wasn't doing enough to protect them from COVID-19. Workers at Amazon warehouses described crowded workspaces, limited access to paid sick days, and confusion over quarantine leave. And despite the advisories of 3 levels of government to stay home, many employees were told it's business as usual. And those who resist or complain about this face unpaid leave and sanctions. So there's no shortage of examples of organizations that clearly were not doing the things they should have been doing to protect their employees, in effect, not caring for the employees. Now, I want to show you an example of an organization that did care for their employees. And there are, of course, organizations that did show considerable care for their employees. And a very good example is a company here in Toronto called Click Health. This is the world's largest independent commercialization partner for life sciences. Basically, they launch, support, and life science brands. Now, let's take a look at some of the things that they did during the pandemic. They created a hub on their website to share everything it did in response to the pandemic, such as safety measures to protect employees. They sourced and donated 400,000 masks to hospitals and long-term care facilities. They made and delivered 1,000 intubation boxes. And get this is incredible. They have an in-office flu shot clinic. They took it on the road directly to employees' homes as part of their commitment to keep employees and their families healthy and happy. And they did this because safety and the well-being of employees is paramount. And when the schools were closed, they introduced virtual tutoring and story time sessions to support employees with young children. They launched a program they called Click Shop, and they gave all employees $500 to spend on office items to make the work from home experience comfortable. They hosted company-wide updates and question and answer sessions, posted videos and transcripts on their COVID-19 intranet portal. And they published a safety protocols and continuity planning document in response to the COVID-19 that shares the best practices with other organizations, such as putting your people first. So there's an example of what it means to care and how an organization did really care for its employees and the actions associated with that caring. Now, why is caring important today? And I think it's become more important than ever. During the pandemic, there were clear signs of the negative effect that employees were experiencing on their mental health and their well-being, considerable high levels of stress and burnout. And since the pandemic, employees have become increasingly likely to prioritize health and well-being over work. Caring is an important resource for people's mental health and well-being. And even before the pandemic, a survey found that caring was important for employees. So this survey done in 2015 found that 4 in 5 Canadian workers expect their employer to help support and take care of their physical and psychological health. And that study also found that in particular, Generation Y felt that employers have a key role to play in supporting their health and wellness. Now look at these two phenomena that also happened in the last year. You probably heard about quiet quitting, this idea about employees refusing to go above and beyond what they have to do and doing just the bare minimum requirements of their job. And there's also been this idea, this report of the Great Resignation and large numbers of turnover in organizations. And I think some of these things, both of these things really, we could trace back to what's happening in organizations and with respect to caring. Now here's an interesting anecdote I came across. So you all know, I think, who Kevin O'Leary is, and apparently he made this statement: if you're a quiet quitter, you're a loser. This is like a virus. This is worse than COVID. And no surprise that a lot of people responded to this. And here's a response that I really think captures the essence of what this is all about, what this means, and the importance of caring. So a popular TikTok user posted a video in which he said, "I'm not going to put in a 60-hour work week and pull myself up by my bootstraps for a job that does not care about me as a person." So, you know, what we're seeing, I think, is the emergence of an increasing concern about care for employees, which I think is going to become a key differentiator among employers and for employees, whether or not the organization cares for employees. So with that, let me just provide you with some definition of what I'm talking about, what organizational care means. So there's not a lot of research about this, but one of the first studies on organizational care defined it this way: perceptions regarding the broad provision of care by the organization to all employees. It captures beliefs about the extent to which the organization cares for employees in general. So what this really is all about is an organization that is focused and concerned about fulfilling employees' needs, promoting employees' best interests, and valuing employees' contributions. It's about being responsive to the needs, the interests, concerns, and the well-being of organizational members. So what I'm going to do now is just review some of the main studies that have been done with respect to caring in the workplace. And what I'm going to basically do is identify where caring can come from in an organization. One of the first studies on caring, and I think a really important qualitative study, was conducted by William Kahn. Now, I just want to point out, this is the same Kahn who did the first major study on employee engagement, which was also a really important qualitative study. And it just so happens Kahn did an equally amazing study on caring. And what he did was he studied networks of caring among employees in a social service agency. And here are some of the main findings from his study. When employees felt they're cared for by their superiors, they were more willing and able to provide caregiving to others. When care was withheld, they felt frustrated and angry. And when care was repeatedly withheld, they withdrew physically and emotionally, and they stopped providing care to coworkers and clients. And a lack or absence of caregiving at the agency contributed to the employees' burnout, disengagement, and turnover. So not being cared for clearly had many negative implications for employees. And here's a quote from Kahn, and I'm showing you this because it highlights the important role that superiors play. A lack of caregiving between superiors and subordinates led to organizational members withdrawing emotionally from one another, creating relationships in which they are regularly disengaged, alienated, and emotionally absent rather than present. And a more recent study also looked at caring from managers. They looked at sales managers, and what they found was that sales managers who demonstrated that they care about the welfare and success of their salespeople, this was associated with higher quality relationships with their employees. So we can see just from Kahn's studies alone just how important caring is, and the consequences of not being cared for. That basically what he found was when these social workers did not feel they were being cared for, in particular by the organization and by superiors, they were not able to care for others, their coworkers, or for the clients that they had to serve. The next study is about coworker caring. They called this care felt. And the definition of care felt is the extent to which a person feels that other organizational members, coworkers, care for her or him. So basically, it's the extent to which employees feel that their coworkers care about them and take care of them and value their contributions and consider, support, and show concern for their needs. And basically what they found, and they were interested in innovation, and they found that care felt was, first of all, positively related to psychological meaningness, availability, and safety. And those, by the way, are the three psychological conditions that Kahn studied in his study on engagement and have been associated with employee engagement. In this study, they found that care felt was related to those three psychological conditions. And those three psychological conditions were associated with the motivation to engage in innovative behaviors and the actual engagement in innovative behaviors. So in this case, feeling that you're cared for by your coworkers is associated with these psychological states and innovative behavior. So caring from coworkers is also important. Also extremely important for caring in an organization, no surprise, is leadership. Leadership plays a critical role in the creation of caring in organizations. And I'm just going to go back to Kahn's study in the social service agency, because one of the other findings that he reported was that one of the reasons that the caregiving system in the agency was so poor was due to the executive director withholding care to others, in particular withholding care to the social workers, to the supervisors, and even the office manager. So clearly the leadership of that organization contributed to creating an uncaring system where everybody basically felt uncared for, and that affected their attitudes and their behavior. Here's another study by Carmelli et al. And they were focused particularly on caring among top management teams. And what they found was that when there was greater caring in these top management teams, this is positively related to strategic adaptability, the ability of the organization to adapt to market changes and achieve a good fit. And I just want to highlight this quote because it kind of emphasizes the importance of caring at the highest level of an organization and how that could affect the entire organization. And here's what they said. CEOs and top management team members who act with a deep sense of caring toward their team members can make a significant positive change in their organization. These acts of caring vary, but they have one thing in common, and that's a concern for the needs of the other person. So leadership, obviously important for caring in an organization. Now, there's another stream of research that looked at caring, and in particular looked at the link between caring and organizational effectiveness. And this is research that comes from an area of research known as positive organizational behavior or positive organizational scholarship. And in this literature, caring is treated as a positive practice that has implications for the effectiveness of the organization. So what these authors did, Cameron et al., they looked at 6 positive practices and the relation of these practices to organizational effectiveness. And they did 2 studies, one in the financial services industry and one in the healthcare industry. And they identified 6 practices, which they consider positive practices, and caring being one of them. The other 5 are compassionate support, forgiveness, inspiration, meaning, respect, integrity, and gratitude. They define caring as people care for, are interested in, and maintain responsibility for one another as friends. And so they looked at the whole composite of these all caring practices together, and what they found in both studies was that these positive practices are positively related to several indicators of organizational effectiveness, including financial performance, turnover, and patient satisfaction. So what we're seeing then from this study is that care is important and positively related to organizational effectiveness together with these other positive practices. So care is important as a positive practice and its relation to organizational effectiveness. Okay, final area I'm going to be talking about that studied caring is research on climate. Now, there's a lot of research over the decades on organizational climates. The basic definition of organizational climate is this idea that members of an organization have these shared perceptions about the organization and what it's like in terms of practices, policies, procedures, routines, and rewards. Basically, what is important in this organization, what behaviors are expected and desired. Organizations can have more than one climate, and there's a lot of different climates that have been identified and studied. Some of the most common include a safety climate, a diversity climate, and a customer service climate. What I'm talking about now is research that looked at what they call a climate of concern for employees, which is defined as employees' beliefs and shared perceptions about the extent to which their organization values and cares about employees' well-being. So this is a particular type of climate. And in one of the first studies that really looked at this type of a climate, they found that it was positively related to outcomes associated with organizational performance, such as sales, personnel, service performance, which was in turn positively related to store financial performance in 594 stores of a large retail company. So that's basically the idea that there's this climate associated with concern, and really it's about caring for employees. Now, there's been 2 other studies that looked at this climate of concern for employees, and what's interesting about these studies is that they are able to link it to human resource practices, in particular high performance work practices, which are basically an interconnected set of HR practices that are meant to facilitate high performance in organizations. And in this first study, what they found was that these high performance work practices are positively related to this climate of concern for employees. And the climate of concern for employees then mediates the relationship between the high performance work practices and employee job satisfaction and organizational commitment. The second study also found that high performance work systems are positively related to a climate of concern for employees, which was in turn positively related to employee health and behavior and business unit market performance. So what we're seeing here is that there is this idea of a climate of caring and concern for employees that is related to various outcomes associated with employees and the organization, and that this climate is influenced by human resource practices. Now, there's one other area of research that has looked at this type of climate, and you've got to look actually hard to find this, at least I had to, because this idea of caring and a climate of care is also associated with research on ethical work climates. And this research goes back several decades. An ethical work climate, which is another type of climate, along with the other ones I mentioned, it has to do with shared perceptions between members of an organization about what basically constitutes right and wrong behaviors. Now, what's interesting about this ethical climate is it actually consists of 5 dimensions or subclimates or climate types. And one of these climate types is a caring climate, which has to do with individuals perceiving that decisions are and should be based on an overarching concern for the well-being of others. So in a caring climate, caring ethical climate, the organization has a sincere interest in the well-being of others in the organization. And the research over many decades of ethical work climates has found, first of all, that when it comes to the different climates that make up the ethical work climate, perhaps not surprising, a caring climate has been found to be the most preferred by employees. And many studies and meta-analysis have shown that a caring climate is positively related to a variety of employee attitudes and behaviors, including job satisfaction, commitment, organizational citizenship behavior, job performance, psychological well-being, and negatively related to dysfunctional behaviors. So we've got basically 2 areas of research showing that a climate of care is really important and has important consequences. So when I put all these things together, and remember, this is research in different places that has never been connected. And what I'm trying to do is make sense of it all and bring it together and try to come up with an idea or a model of caring in and around organizations. So what this shows then is, first of all, that caring can come from different sources in an organization. It can come from the organization, its leadership, from coworkers, from management, and that in some way these different sources of caring can combine and over time create a climate of caring and concern for employees. And then in this type of a climate, employees will basically have this type of belief that my organization or business unit cares about employees, my manager cares about employees, and my coworkers care about each other. So putting these pieces together, I've developed this integrative model of caring in organizations, which basically demonstrates that care can come from different places in an organization, the organization itself and its leadership, management, coworkers, and HRM practices, and over time lead to the emergence of an organizational climate of care and concern for employees, which should have positive consequences for employees with respect to employees' own caring about themselves and about others in the organization, and facilitate their health and their well-being. So that's where I am then in terms of bringing together the research that exists on caring, which is relatively limited and pretty fragmented. So that concludes the first part of the presentation. Let me just finish with some practical implications of this model. Basically, what does this mean in terms of practice? I think the starting point has to be the leaders of organizations who have to make caring a priority and demonstrate that they really do care about employees. And you can find examples of this. For example, PepsiCo lists caring as its first guiding principle. Zappos includes caring as part of its values. But clearly, it has to start with the leadership of an organization, indicating that they do care about employees and demonstrating it with actions. Managers are clearly an important source of caring because that's where employees have direct contact and are influenced every day. So it's important to educate and train managers on the importance of caring for employees and what it means and what actions and behavior they have to exhibit in order to show that they do care for employees. And it would also be helpful through socialization and orientation programs to let new hires know how important caring is, to emphasize the importance of developing and building caring relationships among new hires and with other members of the organization. And the last implication is something I call caring HRM practices. So I'm referring to a certain type of HRM practices that are important because they are there to help employees and to help employees grow and develop and facilitate their health and their well-being. And I'm talking about practices such as flexible work arrangements, work-life balance programs, health and wellness programs, which are all potential ways of helping employees to manage their demands, help them cope with conflicts and stress in their life, and facilitate their health and their well-being. All right, so that concludes the first part of my presentation. Here's part two. Part two I didn't know would exist until about a week ago. So this is a study that I've just completed with Jamie Grumman at the University of Guelph. This is a study on socialization and caring with co-op students. This study was about to begin 3 years ago. So this study was it was set to go around mid-March 3 years ago, and you all know what happened. The study never went ahead. Well, we actually just did it. We did this study last month, and I've only had this data for a week. When I started preparing for this talk, I had no idea I would be able to have access to the data, but I do. So in the week I've had it, I've been able to crunch some numbers and look at some relationships, and that's what I'm going to present to you today. So the basis of this study, the starting point, was a theory of socialization that Jamie Grumman and I developed. It's called socialization resources theory. And the basic idea is that there are different resources that new hires need to help them adjust, to help them learn their new role and facilitate their adjustment and their socialization. So our starting point was to think about how important are these socialization resources, and are they related to the engagement of new hires, and what role does care play in this process? So just to be clear then, what I'm talking about are resources that should be provided to new hires, things like providing them with information about their job and their role in their work group, providing them feedback, opportunities to meet others and develop relationships, and receiving support from coworkers and supervisors. So the basic question then was, what role does care play in the relationship between socialization resources and newcomer engagement? And there is some research showing that socialization practices are related to the engagement of new hires. So we wanted to study that in relation to socialization resources, and to also look at the role that care plays in this relationship. So here's what the study basically was trying to answer in terms of our key research questions. So the first question has to do with the relationship between socialization resources and the climate of care and concern. So I'm talking about that climate of care and concern that I was discussing earlier, that was linked to human resource practices. And what we wanted to see was whether or not socialization resources are related to a climate of care and concern for employees. Second question, is a climate of care and concern for employees related to newcomer caring for the organization? So in other words, if employees perceive a climate of care, will they be more likely to care for the organization in return, which would be consistent with what is known as social exchange theory. So in other words, when employees believe they are cared for, they will return that care by caring about the organization. And the third question has to do with the link between caring for the organization and newcomers' engagement. So is newcomer caring for the organization related to newcomer engagement? So the study basically looks like this. So it's a study with co-op students who have just finished a work term. So 287 students participated. They come from different disciplines. The average age was 20. They had an average of 2.46 work terms. 60% were female, 39% male, 1% other. They basically completed the survey at about 10 weeks into the work term. Looking at the variables that we measured, so we measured these 6 different socialization resources. So for example, we have information. Did they receive information about their job and their role and their work group and about the organization? Have they received feedback about their job performance? Have they attended social events that were held specifically for new hires? Were there socialization agents, members of the organization who were available and ready and willing to help them and assist them and answer their questions? Were they given opportunities to meet members of the organization and develop relationships? And did they receive support from their supervisor? We also measured a climate of care and concern from one of the studies I was talking about earlier. I made up a measure of care for the organization because I don't think anybody has ever measured this before. And we measured a well-known and established measure of employee engagement. So what I then did was 3 regression analyses to take a look at the 3 questions that I was asking. So the first question is, are socialization resources related to a climate of care and concern for employees? So the socialization resources explained a significant amount of the variance, 39% of the variance in a climate of care. And 3 of the resources turned out to be most important: relationship development, information, and supervisor support approach significance. So these results show that socialization resources do contribute to a climate of care and concern for employees. Second question, is a climate of care and concern for employees related to newcomer caring for the organization? So again, we did a regression analysis, and we first entered or controlled for the socialization resources, and then we entered a climate of care. And the climate of care and concern for employees did significantly predict caring for the organization, explaining an additional 6% of the variance. And you can see of the significant variables, a climate of care was the strongest predictor, but 2 of the socialization resources are also significant: feedback and relationship development. And then for the third question, is newcomer caring for the organization related to newcomer engagement? So again, we did a regression, and we first entered the socialization resources, then we entered the climate of care, and then in the third level of entry, we entered caring for the organization, and it did predict newcomer engagement and explained an additional 8% of the variance. And you can see it came out as the strongest predictor of engagement, care for the organization. And 1 of the socialization resources was still significant, that's information. So when I put these relationships together, the result is this model of socialization resources, a climate of care and concern, and employee engagement. So in effect, what these results are showing is that socialization resources do contribute to employees' perception of a climate of care and concern for employees in their organization, the perception that in their organization there is a care and concern for employees. And when they have that perception, they are more likely to care for the organization. And when they care for the organization, they are more likely to be engaged. So that concludes then the second part of the presentation, showing the relationship between socialization resources, a climate of care and concern for employees, employee caring for the organization, and newcomer engagement. Okay, so showing some support for some of the thoughts that I had going into this about the role that caring in a climate of care plays in organizations. Okay, the last part of the presentation has to do with pedagogical caring. So in my research on caring, what I found was there's actually much more research about caring in the educational literature than there is in the management and HRM literature. There's actually a lot of research on pedagogical caring. And the main argument in this literature is that a moral orientation to teaching should include caring. And that part of an instructor's responsibility is for the well-being and ongoing development of students. And so the focus should be on the development of students as caring human beings, as well as learners and performers. And the instructor, therefore, has an opportunity to model and exemplify caring in the organization. Now, where I'm coming from is a study by Hawk and Lyons. They did a very interesting study, and the title of the study was please don't give up upon me when faculty fail to care. And they did this qualitative study in which they asked MBA students a number of questions about whether or not instructors have ever given up on them, and what was involved and what they could have done differently. And interestingly, they actually found that 44% of the respondents indicated that at least one or more instructors had given up on their learning. And so what they wanted to do is find out why. What were the instructors doing, and what could have they done differently? And what I want to do is just highlight some of the main points that they made in this study. Okay, so I'm just going to show you two important quotes from the Hawk and Lyons paper. So the first one is, demonstrating and modeling an ethic of care, pedagogical caring, and pedagogical respect are the appropriate actions for an instructor. Caring helps us reach all of our students. Students who experience an environment of care may be more committed to study in a course and may be more motivated to perform. So clearly, what they're highlighting is the importance of caring in the classroom, and how caring on the part of the instructor has implications for students' learning and their motivation to learn and to perform. And they concluded the paper with the following statement, okay, which I think is really key. So this is the last part of this paper on whether or not instructor has ever given up on students. Faculty have the opportunity to model an ethic of care in their classrooms, in their relationships with their students, and in their relationships with their discipline, their colleagues, and themselves. Students who experience that modeling may be more willing to adopt an ethic of care in their own lives and to become models for others. So with that, I see a connection, given that I'm giving this presentation at an educational institution, and I see a linkage between what we do here and what we do in the classroom and what I'm talking about today, which is organizational caring and caring organizations. So I conclude then with my third model, which I call pedagogical caring and organizational caring. And so the starting point is instructor caring attitudes and behavior. And I've indicated here some examples of what that behavior might be. And in the paper, Hawk and Lyons provide more detail about different actions that instructors can enact in the classroom in the name of caring. So for example, such as getting to know your students, provide your students with constructive feedback, provide encouraging environment for students to be able to speak their mind and engage their voices, modeling caring and respectful behavior, and giving students the opportunity to provide feedback. And so what I'm suggesting here is that when we do this, when we engage in caring behavior in the classroom, we will create more caring students. If we are modeling and exemplifying what it means to care and caring for the students, they will become more caring themselves. And then when they graduate, they will go into organizations. They will become more caring employees, more caring managers, leaders, and entrepreneurs. And this should contribute to creating more caring organizations and more caring workplaces. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is then basically make this linkage between what we do here at the university and what I'm talking about, which is organizational caring and caring organizations. What this really leads to, and what this comes down to, is what's generally known as an ethic of care. And that is the ability to recognize the needs of others and to modify one's behavior and respond in accordance to what those needs are. Because care is a practice. It's a practice that focuses on meeting the needs of others, others for whom their well-being we hold some responsibility for, either by virtue of a natural or social relationship. And it's interesting, to think that what is success in an organization? What does success mean? And it should mean, in part, the growth and well-being of organizational members who are cared for. That should also be considered a measure of success. So to conclude then, I think it's fair to say that caring is a positive practice, an important positive practice that is associated with positivity and flourishing in organizations. It's clear that caring has positive benefits for both employees and organizations. And caring for employees and all stakeholders and all organizational members, this is not just a good idea. This is the right thing to do. And I think it's an ethical imperative. So let me conclude then with this statement. Toronto has written on caring in various instances, and in one of her papers, she made this statement. She said that through good caring, people are better able to live in the world. And I take this, and my take on it is this: through good caring, people will be better able to work, thrive, flourish, grow, and prosper in organizations. Thank you for attending and listening.
Please join me in thanking Professor Sachs for a very timely and engaging presentation. At this point, I'm happy to field any questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat, which I will monitor. Alternatively, if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll invite you to ask your question. Okay, Samantha, please go ahead.
Hi, Alan. Thank you so much. Sorry about the camera. Thank you so much for an important and engaging presentation of your most recent work. I really enjoyed learning about it. And of course, probably like everyone here, I was thinking about our current employer and how caring our employer is of us and what we can do in our actual jobs to be more caring and contribute to that culture of caring that you're suggesting we have, or that all organizations have. I really appreciated the direction that you gave with regard to how we can care for students. Is there anything else that you can offer? Any other research-based findings you can share with regard to how to do that, especially when we're talking about, you know, faculty members who have probably very limited resources themselves that they're working with. So to give when one has limited resources creates, you know, a problem with stress and strain. So I'm just wondering, what realistically more can we do with the limited resources we have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you're talking about what could we do to be more caring for our students, I don't think you need a lot of resources. I think it's more just about education and thinking about what does caring mean in the classroom? How can I model and exemplify caring? And what are the things that I can do as an instructor when I interact with students in the classroom and outside of the classroom? And you know, this isn't, you know, my area. This isn't the area that I'm focusing on. But obviously, I've had to cover a lot of ground in learning about caring, and that included learning about caring in the educational literature as well as the nursing literature, which are the two areas where the most research, I think, has been done on caring. So, you know, if you look at some of the points in my model, I could just go over them. I didn't mention all of the points, but in this paper, and I suggest anybody who's interested in this topic and answering your question, look at this paper by Hawk and Lyons on, you know, please don't give up on me when faculty fail to care. What they did at the end of the paper was they looked at their responses, and they also looked at other studies that have been done on this topic, and they finished the paper with a whole list of different things that instructors can do in the name of caring, and they make these suggestions. And if you want to, I'll just go quickly through them. They provide more detail, but some of them I've mentioned in my model. But get to know your individual students, either by questionnaire or personally. Recognize that your students do not all learn the same way and provide different approaches to learning in the course. Provide generous and constructive feedback on performance. Provide an encouraging and supportive environment for your students to engage their voices and risk their ideas and questions. Listen carefully and reflect on what is happening in the class and in their own learning. Make your performance expectations and learning requirements clear. Model caring and respectful behavior to your students. Give your students opportunities to provide you with feedback on how you are doing, following that with reflection and purposeful ongoing development activities. So, these are some ideas, and they provide more and more detail on them in the paper. I don't think you need a lot of resources to do some of these things. So I would say, think more about that. Every time you go in the classroom, think about these things, and just think about, if I want to be more, if I want a caring instructor, what should I be doing? And when a student comes to see me and they have a concern or an issue or a problem, if I'm caring, what are the things I should be doing? How should I be listening and responding? So I think we can all do that. And I would also say the other thing we could do is interacting with our colleagues, with our own coworkers. When we interact with people, are we being respectful? Are we being caring? Are we showing care and concern towards each other? I would also suggest that we think about that and try to do that better as well.
Thank you for that question. And I apologize. I went against the standard protocol. If you do have a question, please first put it in the chat and I will relay it. I think that's there to try and protect bandwidth for everybody. We do have a couple of comments in there. Can I just ask a quick question? You mentioned Kevin O'Leary, who, sort of infamously eschewed the idea of caring or presented a what I would characterize as an uncaring presentation. And certainly there are some very famous leaders out there who have been noted for their sort of uncaring attitudes. I'm thinking of Elon Musk among them. You mentioned that there can be a positive benefit to the function of the organization if that caring mentality comes from the top. Is there similar research showing the damage to organizational function that occurs if top leaders are espousing sort of anti-caring viewpoints?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that looked specifically at uncaring, other than the research that I discussed today, which shows you the consequences of caring and not caring, and in particular, Kahn's study, which basically found an organizational system that was pretty uncaring, and had a lot to do with the executive director, the senior leader of the social service agency, who was just uncaring towards everybody in the organization, including the employees, the supervisors, and even the office manager. And I think the consequences of that are pretty clear. If you have an uncaring leader, you're likely to have an uncaring climate, uncaring behavior, probably on the part of management, and employees who these days are not going to take it. And hence, we've seen this so-called the great resignation, and employees have been quitting in the thousands. And I think that's the consequence. And I think it's more likely the consequence today than it's ever been before. That people, they're just not going to take it, and they're not going to work to the highest level they can when they don't feel like they're being cared for and getting anything, back within reason.
Great, thank you. We do have two questions in the chat now. First is from Joshua Van Rye. In the context of getting through the COVID-19 situation and organizations that maybe did not demonstrate the best levels of caring as they navigated the challenges of the pandemic, and therefore felt the negative outcomes you mentioned, such as quiet quitting, turnover, etc., how do these organizations recover from this situation and reverse these negative outcomes?
That's a good question. And you have to ask yourself, are they ever going to recover? I mean, do they even understand what they're doing and what the consequences are? I mean, if they're going to recover, they have to be aware of what the problem is, and they have to have, I think, a willingness and a motivation to change. And my guess is that many organizations are not going to change. There are those that are going to be caring organizations and always make their employees a priority, like Click Health, and other organizations that they're just not going to do it, and they don't believe in it, and they don't see it. I think it's possible for organizations to make changes and turn things around, but it's going to take time, and it's going to involve a lot of people, and it's got to really come from the top. I think if you have senior leaders who are willing to make this a priority and take real actions and meaningful actions and many actions to make change, then they can probably do it over a period of time. But my guess is a lot of organizations don't see things this way and won't change.
Thank you. And lastly here from Hunain Kokra, thank you so much, Alan, for this very insightful talk. I was wondering if organizations that create spaces for employees to learn and grow, such as through participation in community of practices, help create caring climates.
I think that is one of the ingredients of creating a caring organization and a climate of care and concern for employees. And so I've developed a model of what I call caring human resource management practices. One of those practices would be providing opportunities for learning and growth and development. But that's just one practice. And I think it takes more than one good thing to create a positive climate of caring and concern. It's really having a bundle of different things, of different practices that are all kind of there to work together and based on a policy of providing care and concern and opportunities for growth and development for employees. So it's a combination of different practices, what I might call a bundle of caring practices, as well as support from management and leadership. So, you know, having a community of practice and learning opportunities is on the right path, and certainly would help. But I think you need more than just that.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time here, so we'll go ahead and end it. And I want to echo the comments of several people who were just saying thank you for a wonderful talk and an exceptionally important and interesting topic. And thank you to everybody that attended today. And please join me once more in thanking Professor Alan Sachs for this wonderful talk and congratulating him on being awarded the 2022 Principals Research Award.
Okay. And thank you all for attending. I appreciate it and your questions.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll post, we'll send out the information regarding where this will be posted later, in addition to sending that email to everybody. All right. Thank you all.